Hello and welcome back to my hometown, our Boomtown, with me, Good Time Tommy. As a matter of fact, I got my three best friends in studio today. Got the weatherman. I don't know how many of you people are watching on site with the weatherman, but he'll go around and he'll ask questions, try to embarrass. He's got his new little girl, Laura Patterson. She's in here. And of course, I've got my partner in crime, Mr. Brandon Ray. How are you doing today?
Hey, someone wants to know what's up with your hair.
Hey, we got people on Periscope. I'm on Michael Burt's page right now, so I'm trying to steal some of his followers. My hair, when you get my age, when you turn 42, you got to come up with all kind of tricks to look younger. So I'm still running from it.
Good. What's been going on, Tommy?
Man, it seems like I haven't been in here in a while, Brandon. I'm glad I got you up early this morning. Today we're going to have a hit country music songwriter in here, Mr. Tim James. I don't know a lot about Tim, but I know he's from Murfreesboro. He went out to LA for a while, then he came back and he's had 3 #1 country hits. So this is going to be focused more on our lifestyle of my hometown, our Boomtown. A lot of times people are going to ask me, who are you going to have in there? And since I'm in real estate, I usually try to focus more on real estate people. But today we're going to have Mr. Tim James. You can actually Google this guy. He's got a Wikipedia. How do you say that word?
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia. He's on Wikipedia under songwriter, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So,
hey Tommy, who would you say is your greatest mentor in life? Sorry to interrupt. We got some Periscope.
Somebody's
people.
asking me that. Well, I'm gonna say Jesus.
Jesus Christ. All
Jesus.
right.
It would start. I had to start with that guy. If you're not giving that guy credit, but let's talk about in the real world. My close mentors would be John Jones.
Right.
But
back in episode 1.
Episode 1, if you want to go way back to 1987, I think is when we filmed our first one. But John Jones is probably my biggest mentors. But outside of that, I'm a big Grant Cardone, Michael Burt fan. I constantly read. So, any more questions from the Periscope audience?
Not yet. But Tommy, did you know that I'm a musician too, just like.
What kind
like
of musician?
Guest.
Brandon Ray. That's
I play
Brandon Ray,
drums.
folks. He's a musician.
That's
himself.
a hard word to say for me.
Are you a singer or a guitar player? Or?
I play drums and I can sing.
Oh well, maybe we can get Tim James. He can bring his guitar in here and we can
get
drum
a new
up.
single going today.
All right. Well, guys, when we come back, we're going to bring back Tim James in our next little segment. So stay tuned and thanks so much for tuning in. Hey guys, welcome back to segment 2 of my hometown, our Boomtown. We've got our guest in here today, the only person that I've brought on the show that's got a Wikipedia page, Mr. Tim James. Tim, thank you for coming on here, buddy.
You're welcome, Tommy. I appreciate you having me.
Do you think we might bust in and do a little, here, we got a drummer here. What instrument do you play?
I play guitar.
Play guitar. Now,
Yeah.
do you sing?
I do.
So I couldn't really do anything. I can just sit here and get us fired up and listen to the music. So like I do every guest, I like to hear their journey, and he's got a very interesting story. You're from Murfreesboro, Oakland Patriot.
That's
correct?
right.
Oakland Patriot. And after high school, what were your plans?
You know, I didn't have a ton of plans. I went to college in Pulaski. I went to Martin. Nowadays it's Martin Methodist.
Right.
In those days it was just Martin Junior College. But I went down there and actually played basketball for a little bit down there. And then after I got out of Martin, I came back to MTSU, and I was at MTSU for a couple of years. I did not finish. And so I decided I wanted to go out and see the Wild West. So having never been on a plane at 23, I decided I would get on a plane and go to LA. And I knew one guy in LA, and I stayed with him for a little while.
Was he a Murfreesboro guy?
He was.
Webb or?
No, it was Scott Arnold. Scott's from Murfreesboro too, and so Scott was living out there. I stayed with him for a little bit till I kind of got on my feet, and was going to stay 6 months and stayed 12 years.
Now, what was the plan to go out there? Was it just to go to LA, or did you have anything in mind that you wanted to do out there?
I really did not. I just always wanted to go see the world. Mm-hmm. And so at the time, in those days, the West was, you know, LA is still LA. I mean, it's got a draw for certain people. It's sort of free thinking, wide open. And I thought that suits me, and that's where I want to go see what it's like.
Now, when did the songwriting creep into your mind? When did you feel like, hey, I want to start writing songs?
Yeah, I had always, even as a kid, I had always written lyrics, but I just never thought about pursuing it much. Growing up in a blue collar household in a blue collar town, my parents' response was, "That's great that you like to fool with music, but you got to get a job, and then you can fool with music on the side." Both my brothers are very talented, but I was living in LA. I was working in pharmaceutical sales, and
a really good job.
yeah, man, it's a great job. I was with A.H. Robbins, so I sold Robitussin in and around LA, and I just got to a point that I just decided that's something that I really wanted to pursue, and I just realized I wasn't getting any younger.
How old were you when these thoughts?
Well, I always had them, but I got to a point when I was probably 30, 31, and all the people that I knew in LA, most of them were in the entertainment business.
So you had friends out there in entertainment?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of my friends are very successful comics and actors, and so I was hanging around those people, and those people were always the complete opposite mindset of what you and I were talking about, and the one that I had, which was, well, I got to have a job. They were like, that's crazy. I mean, if you want to pursue something, you got to get in knee deep and you got to pursue it. I mean, these people are still very, well-known comedians and actors, and they, because they grew up in a different environment where creativity was encouraged.
Right.
They were the first ones to say, you got to quit that job and
So
get
I'm
in
sure
music.
that you're probably making good money doing what you're doing. A lot of security, probably climbing a corporate ladder or thinking that way. You're coming from Murfreesboro, so you've got that mindset. Now you're out here. How long did it take you to make a shift to where you could even fathom, hey, I'm going to leave this security and maybe try something like that? Because I would say that'd take a lot of guts anyway.
Yeah, I don't know that it took a long period of time, but it definitely took a lot of moxie for me to say, I'm done with this job, and I'm sure retrospectively now my parents and my friends were like, man, that's crazy, but I just knew that was not what I was supposed to be doing. So I don't really remember the length of time in terms of the transition, but I just quit. I'd never been on stage with a band, and I put together a band of professional musicians in LA, and because I'd saved my money from pharmaceutical sales, I was able to pay them. And then I went out and my first gig in LA was at a club called the Crest Club, the Crest Lounge in Reseda, California. And the lady that that owned the club, I went out there and sold her. I said, look, I'll bring you 120 people. And so I roped in every friend I had. They came, and I put together this band. We went out and did a show. And next thing you know, I'm booking shows in and around LA. And so that's when it kind of hit me.
What kind of music were you
Country, just covering country songs. In those days, it was, Garth and John Michael Montgomery, Brooks and Dunn, and all that. So we're out covering those songs and playing those on a regular basis. And, then it just hit me. This is what I love to do. I really enjoy the performing aspect of it. And then I started making trips back home to Nashville, or to Murfreesboro, and then I would drive to Nashville and try to get a publishing deal, which is all songs, all copywritten material, as you know, has a publisher. So publishing houses in Nashville sign writers. And so I came back, and I was still living in LA, but I would go to Nashville every day for a week, just like thousands of other people. I knew one person, Charlie Monk, and Charlie is still a very successful publishing executive. And he worked for Acuff Rose. I went in and played him some songs, and he basically shot me down. It was Charlie's one of those guys that does not mince words.
So at this point, you'd gone to LA, you had a good job, you quit your job, you're covering country music, you're coming back here feeling good about yourself, and your first encounter with an opportunity, you're knocked down.
Oh gosh, you get knocked down, as everybody knows. If you're in anything that you decide to do on your own, you're going to get knocked down probably a lot more than you get people lifting you up. But, you know, my dad was always one of those people that said, you can do anything you want. You're just going to have to get up when you get knocked down. So, yeah, man, I got shot down. I was making the commute between LA and Nashville 4 or 5 times a year. And yeah, I just got rejected on a regular basis for probably, you know, 2 years. And then one trip I came home and I met a guy that works at ASCAP. We have 3 performance rights organizations. One's ASCAP, one's BMI, one's CSAC. So I met a guy at ASCAP who said, wow, I mean, you're really good. And he introduced me to somebody else who ran a publishing company, and they didn't sign me, but the guy said, I'd love to sign you, but I can't right now, but I do know somebody who's signing writers. So my first publishing deal was 17 years ago, 18 years ago, was with a company that Don Schlitz wrote The Gambler and When You Say Nothing at All. Yeah. And Don said, I want to sign him to a deal, so they signed me there.
So during this time back in LA, don't want to leave LA just yet. So we're back there in LA. You've quit your pharmaceutical job. You're covering music. It sounds like you're wanting to get into writing music. Yeah. But were you doing anything back in LA to make ends meet, or did you save up enough money from that good job that you had?
Both. You know, I had saved my money, 1, and 2, I was playing enough gigs, whether they be with the band or whether they be just me trying to play stuff at a hotel lounge to try to get my chops up and also make some money. So yeah, that's what I did.
During this time, did you ever believe you're going to be a performer, or was that not something that you?
You know, I got to a place, to be honest with you, where I did it for about 3 years, and I just got to a place where I realized that I wasn't as good as, you know, the guys that were making a living at it. And somebody told me, they said, it was Charlie Monk. Charlie said, you know, you're good, you're not great, but he said, you do have some talent as a songwriter, but you're gonna have to really get in here and work at it. And, you know, the day I was meeting with Charlie at Acuff Rose, Charlie said, you know, Fred Knobloch and these guys are in the other room, they write 150 songs a year, and you come in from LA with 4 every quarter. I mean, you got to be here in Nashville if you want to write songs.
So were you encouraged or discouraged by what he was telling you?
Well, I was certainly discouraged by his words, but again, because just like anything else in my life, I was not afraid of the unknown. I said, I'm not letting him have the final word. And Charlie, who's still in the music business, I'll see him tonight. Tonight's the BMI Awards, and when I had my first #1 song, Charlie came and celebrated at the ASCAP building, and he said, I always knew you'd make it, which is what everybody in the music business says after they told you you'll never make it. But that's all right. You know, I just was not going to be denied early on. I said, this is what I've decided to do, and this is what I'm going to do.
Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap up segment 1 with just what was your favorite memory from LA? Because me, I'm 42, and I grew up here, and the one regret I probably have is that I lived in Nashville for about 7 years, but I never got outside of my comfort zone and experienced what you're talking about. So to the people, you know, there's people that wake up and they have dreams and they want to go chase them. What would you tell people based off your experience out in LA? What does it take to go do that? And would you recommend others chasing that?
Yeah, I don't know that I would recommend it or not recommend it, but I'll tell you, it takes commitment. Everything takes commitment on whatever level you're on. I, as a young man, again, did not have a tremendous amount of fear, and so I can't say that I got on the plane and, you know, rah-rah-ree and flew to LA and thought, this is great. But on the other hand, I did. I really remember getting there, and you know, the Pacific Ocean is right there, and it was just, as a 23-year-old, it was a fantastic environment. I have way too many memories to list my favorite, but I met some fantastic people who I've been back in Tennessee for probably 17, 18 years, and I still go out there once a year and see friends that I've had for 25 years.
Do you think you would be as successful as you are today without going out there and finding yourself?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Well, we're going to come back and we're going to get into the songwriter career when that started. How old were you when that started? When you became a songwriter?
Well, I mean, I signed my first publishing deal at probably 37, and I had my first #1 song at 40.
Okay, when we get back, we're going to talk about those days with Mr. Tim James. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, folks, we're back. Segment 3 with LA Cowboy. We're moving back to Nashville, so we want to pick up and ask Tim. You are now back to Nashville, Murfreesboro. Were you living in Murfreesboro?
Murfreesboro,
Nashville?
yeah.
And you are you've given up on LA. You've moved back here. You're ready to become a songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you get your first? I don't even know how it works. Do you just apply for jobs, or tell us how you got your first real paying gig?
Well, like I said earlier, I had been making trips back, so I had established some contacts. So when I finally moved home, I always wanted to come back home. I never wanted to stay in LA, just like anything else. The first 8 or 9 years went by like that. And then I woke up and went, wow, I've been here 10 years. And then I started making trips back with the intent of moving back home. But I moved home because I had been offered a publishing deal. Again, all songs have publishers. And so I had been offered a publishing deal, a standard publishing deal by a very small publishing company. They pay you a very minimal amount of money in exchange for your publishing. So all songs are split into 2 categories: songwriting income and publishing income. Consequently, if you get a song recorded and it's a hit, you would always reap the songwriting dollars. But if they're your publisher and they paid you, just hypothetically, let's say 20 grand a year, a hit song, the publishing side could be worth 400. So
400,000?
Yes.
Okay.
So then you see the difference. They've paid you 25,000 a year for your publishing.
And you don't get any of that?
No.
You just get
You do when you get established. You get what's called a co-publishing deal. But anyway, I signed with a small company, and I was happy to have the deal. They gave me a break, and I signed there. After a year and a half, they closed up, and I had thought, I've made a huge mistake. I quit a good job, and I had met the girl who would end up being my wife, and she has always been a big advocate and probably my biggest fan. She always said, even then, she said, no, you just got to keep chasing it. So I was painting at 30, probably 39. I was painting houses for my cousin, who is a great house painter, if you need your house painted. And he was very cool about it. He allowed me to work for him 3 days a week, which was usually, say, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I would go to Nashville. And I continued to go, and I wrote countless songs and made inroads and continued to make those inroads. And then one night I was at a Titans game with some guys who have gone on to become Frank Rogers, he produced all Brad Paisley's records. Tracy's written #1 songs. Chris Dubois, and all these guys are very, very successful songwriters and publishers and producers.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm very dumb at this. What is the difference between writing a song and publishing it? Is there?
Well, you can write it, but in order to publish it, that book, for instance, somebody's got to do the work, and somebody's got to register it, somebody's got to admin it, they've got to put that in that form. As a songwriter, what you typically do is write it and record it, hand it over to somebody that then publishes it, takes it out, plays it for people, and registers the copyright.
So the writer would supply the content, the publisher would do the packaging of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just half their battle. I mean, they've also, like I said, they've got to register it with the Copyright Office. They do all the legwork.
Now, during this time, where was your skill set more? Were you more of a writer or a publisher?
Well, I've never been a publisher per se. I strictly was a songwriter.
Okay.
So I was writing songs. They closed up. Like I said, I went to a football game with some guys, and one of the guys, Rob Hendon, said, hey, I know some guys that are starting a publishing company. Call me tomorrow. I call him, and he says it's him and Toby Keith and TK Kimbrell, and TK's Toby's manager. So I went in and met with him. I played him some songs, and he said, man, I really like these songs. Long story very short, they signed me to a publishing deal, again, a very standard publishing deal. So I give them my publishing.
Is that enough money, these little publishing deals, to live on, or is it just to Or do you still have to, are you still painting houses? Are you
I'm still painting. You know, the whole objective of a publishing deal is to allow you to pursue songwriting full time.
Okay.
So yeah, that basically was what that did. It allowed me, but I supplemented my income even then by continuing to paint a couple days a week for my cousin. But I was with those guys. It was called Paddock Music in those days, and it was Toby and TK and Rob, as I said. And so, man, I signed my deal lickety split because I wanted to be back in the game. You know, you got to be in the game. I mean, you can't. If you're not one of the players in the game, you're not going to get a hit.
So you were around Toby Keith?
Well, not at that time, but I signed with his company.
Okay.
He signed off on it, and then he came into town shortly thereafter and said there was 3 writers there. I was one of them, and he said, "Let me listen to what they've got." So we sorted through what we thought were the best pitches, and one of the songs on there was "My List," and that I had written with another guy, and Toby heard it and said, "You know, I think I'm gonna cut that song." So he had just come off an album that sold 4 million copies, and then he put "My List" on an album that ended up selling a tremendous amount of copies as well. But the first 2 singles, a single's a song that goes to radio.
Okay.
That's what you hear on the radio. You know, an album has 12 songs on it, only 3 or 4 go to radio.
Right.
So his first 2 singles were "I Want to Talk About Me" and
I like that song.
yeah,
Talk About Me.
I do too. And "I'm Just Talking About Tonight." And then, to be honest with you, 9/11 happened, and it was just a sad day. But
Right.
the head of DreamWorks Records, that's where Toby was signed, he said, "If you really want to put out a song that will resonate with people because of the way people were feeling about 9/11 and they felt like they need something to hang on," they said, "Put out that My List song." So that was my first single, and that song was a 5-week #1 song.
Number one. So
one.
where did you write this song? Were you back here in Nashville?
Yeah,
Or where did
yeah.
where did that come from?
I was here and I was living here, painting houses, just writing songs every day. You just got to throw so many in the filter that at the bottom some come out that are good. But I was writing songs, and I showed up to write one day with this guy named Rand Bishop, and I had always been a list guy. I still do. I did it last night. It's 20 years later, but I wrote down, this is what I need to get done. And my dad, who again was probably, one of the guys that was like, "You can do this." He always, for the most part, believed in me. My dad had a heart attack, and I remember saying to myself, my list is all jacked up. I've got all these things that I've got to do, and the truth is, what I've got to do is spend more time with my parents, and my list needs to be reprioritized. So I showed up to write with Rand, and I said, "I've got an idea for a song about my list and how I think it should change and be like more important things."
Right. How long did it take to write that song?
Took about 3 hours one day, and then we got together again a week later, which is what writers do a lot, in an afternoon, and finished it in about an hour and a half.
Wow.
And Rand sat down on his, in those days, it was just an old, probably Tascam recorder, looked about like that actually, and he made a tape of himself playing and singing it, gave it to me, and as I said, at that point I'd played it for Toby and those guys, and the rest is
When you
history.
heard it, was it exactly what you wanted when you heard it, or did you make some tweaks?
He made a couple of tweaks, but they were fine by me, and because that was my first, hit, or it was my first song with a major label act, I didn't.
Did you know right then you had something pretty golden,
No.
or how long did it take you to start capitalizing off that song and that?
Well, Nashville's is a town of followers to some degree, so nobody was necessarily giving me the time of day. Although I was signed to a publishing company, Nashville's very cliquish, and so when they chose that song as the 3rd single off that album, I still probably couldn't get the time of day from some people. My sphere of influence had started to expand, but not as like an A-list writer, and 6 months later, when that song went #1 for 5 straight weeks and ended up being the 2001, there's 2 different charts in Nashville. It was the R&R Song of the Year, which meant it was the most played song of the year. It got played more than any other song the entire year. That's when I started to reap some of the benefits, and people were like, wow, that guy's good, because nobody thinks you're good. If you're coaching, nobody thinks you're good until you start winning games.
That's right. That's right. So what was your next step after? So you wrote the song, and it took 6 months to.
Well, you don't get paid. I mean, it took 6 months probably for the album to even come out, and then it took another 6 months for them to go through the first 2 singles. Then it probably took another 6 months. So it's a 1.5-year process.
So you didn't know what you had for a 1.5 years?
No, I knew it was. Once it came out, I thought this is going to do well. But no, I had no idea it would be a big a hit as it has been. I mean, it's been played now over 3 million times.
Wow. So after that, do you have people start contacting you now? So what after the list? What's going on in Tim's life?
Well, so, again, you're not the A-list guy, but you're certainly on the map.
Are we still painting houses at this point?
No, not that I'm above painting a house, but no, a 5-week #1 song is it's a lucrative deal. And
is it still lucrative like 10 years later?
Sure, absolutely.
Because I don't have any idea of how that works.
They work on an ascending, descending scale. So as the song is climbing up the Billboard charts, the song is getting played a certain amount of times at number 40, and it gets played more times at number 20, more times at number 10, and if it gets to 1, it is literally the most played song in the nation.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you're feeling really good about what you did after all the giving up your pharmaceutical job. Now you're back here. You have this. So what are you feeling next? Are you feeling like, I'm a pretty damn good songwriter? or are people coming to you wanting you to write songs? Or how does it progress once you've had success like that?
Well, it helps on all fronts. But again, I wasn't automatically an A guy, but it allowed me to do a lot of things. It allowed me to, say, hey, I'm a #1 songwriter. I've had a #1 song. And that does carry over into Nashville. It allowed me to, buy a home. It didn't necessarily allow me, but my wife and I got married, and it benefits you in 1,000 different ways.
What was the next? Did you ever take a break from writing, or were you still in there on the grind?
No. The minute that song was a #1 song, and they had a party for us. It's always a big party, a big deal. And so they had a party for us, and the next day I was back in the office, writing something else. So no, I've always tried to strike while it's hot,
Okay. So when what was your second #1 hit? Was that
Well, I was with that company for about 2.5 years, that publishing company. They closed up, and then I signed with another company. And then I had songs cut by Leanne Womack and Montgomery Gentry. All these people were hit acts in the day, Brad Martin, Buddy Jewell, people that were getting songs out on the radio, but I wasn't getting any songs on the radio. I wasn't getting selected as the single. So it was, that was 2001, 2002. I think it was 2006 when I had it wasn't a #1, but I got a song cut. There was a guy on American Idol named Bucky Covington, and Bucky had come to Nashville. He got a record deal, and they cut some songs on him, and they chose, he had a top 10, I can't remember the first single from that album, but the second single was a song I wrote called It's Good to Be Us. So that song went to #9. So, that was an ASCAP award-winning song. If you're one of the top 40 most played songs of the year, you get an award. So that song won an award. The following year, I had a song, again, on a new band called The Lost Trailers, which went top 10. The following year, I had a single on Trace Adkins called All I Ask For Anymore. That was a top 10 and got nominated for a Grammy. And again, all these songs, a #1 pay, obviously, or not obviously, but a #1 pays the most, but a top 10 song pays out. And the beauty of songs is that it's residual income. So, every time that song gets played still to this day, my list gets played.
Did you just get a check?
Every quarter, yeah.
Really? So, How were you introduced to like George? What's been your favorite number one song? Or
Well,
can you have a favorite?
No, they're all, my favorites, all the ones that make money, because my kids ain't gonna feed themselves. But after I had the All I Asked For Anymore, the Grammy, the following year I sat down and wrote a song. My dad passed away, and so I was telling this co-writer friend of mine about it, and we wrote a song called Love Like Crazy. And that song was a hit for Lee Brice, and it went to number one. Now it went to number 2 on the official Billboard charts, but on one of the other charts it went to number 1. So I say it's a doggone number 1.
Right. I do too.
But it won the 2010 or 11 Billboard Song of the Year, and it got nominated for CMA Song of the Year. It lost, but. That was my second number 1 song, and then 2 years ago, I'm still getting songs recorded during this whole period. I've had, again, Craig Morgan and all these people that are viable country acts, but if you don't get the single, nobody really knows about it. Right. But
do you still get paid on things that are on the album?
Sure.
Or is it,
Absolutely. Okay. It's copywritten material. It's intellectual property. So I had Love Like Crazy, and then same thing. I just sat down one day with some guys and wrote a song called Give It All We Got Tonight. And then my publisher at the time was Warner Chappell, which is Warner Brothers publishing arm. They took it into George Strait's record label and played it for them. And they said, we love this. We're going to cut it on George. So they cut it on George. And then they called me from the actual record label and said, hey, man, this is going to be the single on George. And it was George's 60th number 1 song. And sadly,
how long was it number 1?
It was only number 1 for a week, but it still went number 1.
So it sounds like the biggest hit was the first one.
Well, in terms of length of time, but Love Like Crazy is still the longest running song in the history of the Billboard charts. If you Google
Really?
it. Yeah.
I did not realize that.
It was on the charts for 56 weeks, which he was on Curb, or he's still on Curb, but they put that song out, man, I want to say like January, and it was on the charts. By the time it peaked, it had been February of the following year.
Wow, I did not realize that. Do you ever develop relationships with the singers, or do you?
Not really, man. I've got 2 songs on the current Darius Rucker album, and so I'm kind of...
Really? Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I kind of have, I don't know, I've developed a little bit of a relationship with him.
Now they're bringing back Hootie. Is that true, or is that just a rumor?
Well, I think they will.
Or can you tell us? Is this illegal?
No, I think they will, absolutely. I don't know when that's going to be, and that's what he says. He says, I don't know, we'll see.
So you've got 2, is this your most current songs out with him?
In terms of being recorded and out, I've got the title track to the new album called Southern Style.
What is that title track? What does that mean?
That means the name of the album. So if Darius's new album, the name of the album is Darius Rucker, Southern Style.
And that's your song?
Yes. So like whatever album, AC/DC, Back in Black, that was the name of the album, and that's...
So is that usually the headline?
No, it just means that's the name of the album. Okay. Then they have to pick singles, and if they pick your song.
Do you feel like they'll definitely pick Southern?
Yeah, they picked it, and it came out. It didn't do as well as I would hope, but it came out. And I got another one on there called So I Sang, which is a song I'm probably as proud of as any song I've ever written. But
do you feel like I don't know how to word this, but is it the success of the song, is it more about the singer or the writer?
It's really about neither, to be honest with you. It's about how far and how much the record label is willing to invest in the song. I mean, so many average songs, and this could probably segue into your last segment, so many average songs get pushed up the charts, and they spend the money on them because they want to see that person successful.
Hey, I'm watching Nashville, so I see what they're doing on there. So we're going to wrap up this. We've gone a little long, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to mention during this time period that we've talked about?
Not that I can think of.
All right, well, we're going to come back with our last segment with the LA Cowboy. That's what we're going to start calling this guy, so stay tuned. Hey guys, we're back for our last segment with Mr. Tim James. Hope you've enjoyed the interview so far. What I'd like to talk about now is where the music industry is, because hey, I'm a YouTube guy. I don't know if I'm robbing from people when I do that or downloads. I don't understand all that stuff. So today, what is the music industry like? How is it operating?
Well, the business end of it is in a pretty sad state right now, because for years, if a song a song is what's deemed as intellectual property. And so for somebody just to rip that, like they used to do with YouTube videos, I don't know if they do now. There's nothing that says you can't go to YouTube and view a video, but people would rip those videos. So they would save them.
What does that
Well, they would save them, put them in their files, and then they basically,
okay.
instead of purchasing that, they just had it for free. And then they could learn the song or they could do whatever. And the equivalent is people say, hey man, you don't ask Starbucks to give you free coffee. Why would you ask a songwriter or a music company to give you free music? That's only part of the problem. One of the bigger problems is streaming services, which Nashville, or probably the music business as a whole, didn't see coming to this extent. So years ago, let's just say if you're on a Garth, but for that matter, if you're on a Toby Keith record and it sold, the first album that my list was on, the album sold 3.5 million copies. It was on Greatest Hits 1, which sold 4 million copies. Greatest Hits 2 sold 2 million. Greatest Hits 3 sold 1 million. And now if Toby Keith puts out an album and it sells 100,000, he's grateful, because people don't buy records like they did back in the day. The younger generation simply goes to, and right now it would be great if they would go to iTunes and even buy records, but what happens is people join streaming services like Spotify and Pandora don't pay songwriters, they pay you pennies.
How do they get access to the songs? Do they buy it and they get to use it, or how?
No, they have just, Pandora and Spotify, those type services, just years ago came to agreements with publishing companies that they would allow people to download these songs, and didn't reveal what turned out to be the accurate price. So if a song gets played on the radio, every time a song gets played anywhere, anytime, it's called a public performance. BMI or ASCAP or CSAC is responsible for collecting those dimes. Because if you get played 3 million times, that starts to add up.
That's right.
And any dime is significant at this point, but for instance, Pandora, Love Like Crazy got played 1,174,000 times last quarter on Pandora, and it paid $1,400 or something along those lines.
What should it have paid?
Well, if that was on what's called terrestrial radio, there's satellite radio, and then there's terrestrial radio, which you and I would have just referred to as radio back in the day, WKDF, whatever it would have been. It would have been monumental for your career. I mean,
is there anything that they is there any way they can take this back, these agreements that they made with streaming radio?
Yeah, we're currently, all the representatives from the NSAI, which is the Nashville Songwriters Association International, they are on Capitol Hill bi-monthly trying to renegotiate these rates, because they're saying, the guy that this was in the news not long ago, the guy that wrote All About That Bass, that guy put out an article that was on various social media sites and said his statement said that song, and these numbers are not accurate, had been played like 10 million times, and he had made a couple of grand. So that's 10 million times somebody's listened to what you created, and you made a couple $1,000s, and people go, well, you still made a couple $1,000s. What they don't take into account is that 10,000 hour theory. What about all the years that guy put in to get that one big song? And that's the same with country. Is people say, well, gosh, you still make a killing off of a hit song. Well, one, not nearly as much as you used to, and two, you don't take into account all the hours that I put in those, or all the songs I threw in the filter to Give It All We Got Tonight.
When did this change start? When did the streaming radio?
Well, again, Nashville at least was caught off guard. It was 4, 5, 6 years ago, when Nashville said, hey, look, country fans will still go out and buy records. The demographic is still this. Well, the demographic changed. The record buying public now is typically females between 18 and 24. They're not going to go to Target and buy a
So,
record.
so let's just say in 2000, like a number one hit that was just on the charts 1 week, would a writer, how much money would just like an average could a writer have made? Then versus today?
Yeah. Well, if it's on the radio, it still pays close to the same amount, but because of the other services, you lose what's called mechanical income. Songs are also split into mechanical and performance income. Mechanical means it's sold somewhere. So those are the dollars that have dropped so drastically. But you still don't make, there's not as many profitable radio stations out there. So consequently, we don't even make as much on our performance side.
Would you say it's in half? Or
No,
not
no,
that bad?
definitely not in half. But, and I wouldn't want to put a number on it. I mean, you could make, a lot of money if you
Even
if you had a
today,
hit
you
song.
can?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. But it's not what it used to be.
Are there any other changes that you see coming in country music that people like me would like old school country, or is it going to change, or is it going to continue to be tailgate music and that? Or?
Man, I hope not, because that's not really, certainly not my wheelhouse. I mean, I got 2 daughters and a wife at home. I'm not exactly out sitting with the tan line tailgate crowd. And I think, based on what I hear down on Music Row on a daily basis, is the tide is starting to turn, that people are a little bit tired of hearing the same old song with basically a rap track,
Right.
and some guy singing some bad country lyrics over it. People want to get back to that. Now that remains to be seen.
Okay,
We'll
so
see.
earlier we almost got into this, what it takes to be a number one song. And you're not necessarily saying it's the singer or the writer, but you're feeling like it could be how much money's pumped into
Yeah.
this. So how does that work?
I think it's and I didn't mean to just bypass that and say the song and the singer don't count, but you could take an average song with an average singer and a company that's willing to invest boatloads of money, and they could make that a number
So they're
one
betting
song.
on this song, and they
Sure.
could be wrong. So out of your 1,000, you've written at least 1,000 songs. Do you have a song that you feel like is the best song that you've written? Do you have a favorite kid?
Yeah, no, not really. The one that's on the new Darius Rucker album, which is called So I Sang, is one of my favorites. There's no doubt about that. But, that song probably won't ever see the light of day other than being on an album. So, the only thing you can do is, the only thing that's within your control is to continue to write if you're a writer. You just have to keep writing. If it doesn't sell or if it doesn't become a single, all that's out of your hands.
The last question I want to ask, and I'll probably ask you some more, I always say this, but one of the things that I'm an avid learner, and Michael Bird, he wrote a book called Swag, and I really believe in how you protect and maintain your confidence. But in your profession, it seems like writers and performers, you're almost at the mercy of people. So when things aren't going good, how do you protect your confidence? How do you stay upbeat? How do you fight through that? Because
Well-
you've had a lot of good times, and you took a while for it to happen. So
I try to keep it all in perspective. It's all sort of relative to me. When I complain about my situation, or the Darius record is not selling a ton, or I have friends that have been in this as long as I have, that kind of my crew that I started with, 20 years ago, and they're my age, and they have never had a hit song. And I've had 6 hit songs, 3 of those being number one songs. So I try, and my wife is good at, kind of keeping it real, shall we say. And so between the two, I just always try to be grateful for what I have. I don't get up every day feeling like, man, today I'm gonna write a great song today. Some days I simply get the lunch pail and put on the helmet and go into work, and you never know. You might get there and somebody might say, what about this? And you might say, that's the best idea I've ever heard, and you write it and you get it cut. Chances are it's not going to happen, but if you're not present, you're not going to win.
So if someone comes to you, they're 23 years old, they're looking up to Tim, and you're their mentor, they want to write songs, what would you tell somebody? 23 may be too young, whatever age, what would be your advice to tell somebody how you feel like if you do X, this is going to give you the best chance to make it in this business?
I don't know. There's part of me that wants to, because of the state of the business, Nashville used to have I think they used to say 3,000 what they call signed songwriters, which means those 3,000 people are signed to a publishing company, which means every day they're in there trying to make it happen. Now there's 300. So you can see over a 10-year period how it's shrunk. So for young people to come to Nashville and pursue it, you got to know your chances are slim and none, one. But the flip side of that is that, if you don't come here and if you don't meet your crew and dig in and work at it and go to the Bluebird and go to shows and do all that, it will never happen for you. So I don't know that there's nothing I can say.
Is it networking? Is that important?
Well, that's very important. Anymore, I don't really network certainly as much as I used to, but for younger people, yeah, that's what I say. You got to meet people that are in your age group, and you got to meet them, and you guys got to kind of come up together, and you pay your dues together, and then if you stay here long enough, and you have talent, then it could happen for you, but you got to be here.
So you don't feel like you can be a writer in Kansas City or what? You got to be in Nashville and around the people. So
yeah.
Somebody asked us earlier on Periscope what I thought the secrets to success were, and my opinion is networks are very important to almost. Networks equals net worth. The more people that you have access to, the greater chance you have of being successful. So, Dan, is there anything that you would like to add that maybe I haven't asked you?
Well, again, to refer back to what we were just talking about, there's so many schools of thought on that. I had a day job that I quit to do it, so I'd save some money. But along the way, I remember saying to one of my friends that I was writing with, I said, I think it had been a couple years since I had anything, and I said, I've got to have a plan B. And he said, just remember, if you have a plan B, it'll happen.
Plan B will happen?
Absolutely. And that always stuck with me. So this has got to be your commitment. Charlie Monk, the first guy that ever...
Mr. Blunt.
Mr. Blunt, who also was, he comes to every party I ever have. But he is one of those guys that said, if you want to be an actor in movies, go to LA. If you want to be on stage, go to New York. If you want to write country music, you got to be in Nashville.
Okay. Well, guys, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for tuning in, and look forward to our next show coming out. Thank you. Have a great day, and thank you, Tim, for coming on.
You're welcome.